Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mediterranean and DASH diet nutrition class. This is week 5. This week we are going to be talking about whole grains. As you can see in that photo, there are a lot of different sources of whole grains. So we'll be speaking about more of those today. So you may have heard the words whole grain and refined grain. So what are the differences between these two grains or types of grains? So before we get into that, there are 3 parts of a grain. So there, if you look on the photo to the right, there is the bran. So this is the outside of the grain. It is the outer skin, it has multi-layers, and it is edible. If you kind of think of like a popcorn kernel. The crunchy outside, the hard would be the bran. And then there's the germ, which is in the very middle of the grain. This is an embryo, and which actually has the potential to sprout into a new plant. And then there's the endosperm. This is the part in the middle, and this is the food supply for the germ. It provides essential energy to the plant, so it can send its roots down into the ground for water and nutrients, and then it sends the sprouts up for the sunlight's photosynthesizing power. So for a whole grain, it needs to have all 3 of these factors of the grain. A refined grain is missing at least one of those 3 components. So when you refine a grain, when you take away part of those pieces of the grain, it removes about 1/4 of the protein in the grain and also removes about 1/2 to 2/3 or more of the nutrients in the grain. So when we talk about refined grains, these are less recommended because they have fewer nutrients. It also removes some of the fiber, which is important, that we've talked about in the fruit and vegetable week, and we will also speak about this more today. Whole grains are important. It is important to pick the whole grains versus the refined grains because they're good sources of dietary fiber, like I mentioned, which this fiber can help improve blood cholesterol levels. It can lower your risk of heart disease, stroke, obesity, and even type 2 diabetes. And there are more benefits, which we will also talk about again later today. So when you are picking a whole grain, it is healthier because the refined grains are always processed. So these refined grains are not found in nature. The grains found in nature are going to have those 3 components, the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. Refined grains, which again have one of those 3 removed, aren't found in nature because it requires processing to refine the grains. So again, why would we want to pick the whole grains? Like I said, refining the grains, taking away one of those 3 parts, it removes important nutrients. So whole grains, when all these 3 pieces are intact, it contains nutrients like thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, folate, iron, magnesium, and selenium. So these nutrients are really important for things like forming new cells in your body, carrying your oxygen in the blood, which a lot of people, if you think about iron deficiency, this is part of, a reduced capacity for carrying the oxygen throughout the body. And these nutrients are also important for regulating the thyroid. And it is also important for having a healthy immune system. So you need a lot of nutrients, like the ones contained in whole grains, for having a healthy immune system. So what is the serving size for whole grains on the DASH or Mediterranean diet? You want about 4 to 6 servings a day of these whole grains. And I did not list these servings a day for refined grains because, again, you want to be avoiding those refined grains as much as possible. These are some examples of whole grains of what one serving of a whole grain would be. This would be about a slice of a whole wheat bread, 1 ounce of a dry whole grain cereal like Cheerios or Raisin Bran. Again, you want to be looking for those whole grains. Also, a 1/2 cup of cooked oats or oatmeal, brown rice, or whole wheat or whole grain pasta. You don't want to be buying the white rice or the white pasta, these are not whole grains. So whole grains, again, contains a lot of fiber, like fruits and vegetables. So the FDA recommends about 25 grams of fiber a day for a 2,000 calorie diet. I know I mentioned this in the fruit and vegetable week. That is just the average. 25 grams of fiber a day is the average recommendation. So fiber-rich foods, again, are very filling. They help us feel full for longer. Fiber is found in plant-based foods. So these foods are often higher in antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. Again, it can help with healthy digestion. And you want to make sure when you're increasing your fiber, you're also increasing your water intake. You don't get a lot of calories from fiber. So you can be eating more of fiber-containing foods without having a large intake of calories. Again, we talked about the types of fiber. There's soluble and insoluble. And a diet high in fiber also helps to reduce inflammation in your body and, again, reduce blood pressure. So these are some examples of whole grains. Things like farro, quinoa, brown white rice. White rice is an example of a refined grain. So brown rice is a whole grain, white rice is a refined grain. Oats is a whole grain, whole wheat bread, pasta, anything whole wheat, millet, cornmeal, buckwheat, barley, corn, couscous, spelt, rye, and bulgur. So as you can see, there are a lot of different sources of whole grains. It's actually pretty easy to find most of these in a store. So the refined grains, again, are anything that you wouldn't find in nature. Like I mentioned, white rice, if you went and saw rice that had just been harvested, it would be brown rice because, again, in order to create white rice or white bread or anything like that, it needs to be very highly processed and have some of the parts of a grain removed. So for this week, we are going to be making oat blueberry muffins. Again, the whole grain in this recipe is going to be the oats. I hope you enjoyed this week's recipe.